Welcome to the Fox and Fish Podcast, your home for all things spooky, creepy, and horrifying. My name is Phinn, aka The Fish.
And I am Kirrianna the Fox.
So we are in episode 2. It is Kirrianna's turn. She is getting over a flu, but she really wanted to get this episode out, and I really appreciate that, so I apologize for any sniffling or coughing noises. But this is going to be a good episode, I think. We got a very interesting topic, and this might be a longer episode than the Mothman.
Yeah, I found a lot, and this episode isn't even going to have everything I found, and it seems like there's a plethora of information out there that I didn't find. But
what are we talking about, Kirrianna?
We are talking about Skinwalkers today.
Ooh, I'm excited because I've, growing up on the internet, growing up in that, horror sphere, you're talking about like Old Corpse Husband, you're talking about Darkness Prevails, Lazy Masquerade, all of those amazing like horror story Reddit readers. Skinwalkers always pop up, and I don't know a lot about them, but I'm very curious. Also, we watch some paranormal investigation channels, primarily Twin Paranormal. That's our favorite one. Shout out to them.
Shout out. And
they have like a whole section of like places they go with Skinwalker activity, and I'm so damn curious about them.
I kind of wanted to start this episode off asking you what you know about Skinwalkers.
Not a whole lot. I mean, like, especially after just hearing a little bit of the stuff, like just getting sneak peeks of it.
I've been trying to keep as much as I can from you, but there's been so much exciting stuff I found that I want to be like, babe, guess what?
Yeah, not a lot. The main things I know is that they are based in Native American, and I don't even think it's every tribe. I think it's just maybe a few of them. I don't know. I know that they are... you're not supposed to talk about them, which I think is something you're going to be coming up, saying in a little bit.
Yep.
A little disclaimer you have. But yeah, I don't really know much. To my knowledge, they were like shape-shifting, like maybe witches or something that could like take the form of anyone they wanted to. I know there's a lot of stories about them like trying to like mimic people's like mothers or family members to get them to like come outside or something, or come out into the next room. I don't know. Like, I don't know a whole lot.
I will say I didn't find any examples of stories where a Skinwalker impersonates another person.
Okay.
But pretty much everything you said is pretty damn close to the mark.
Okay.
They are, as far as I'm aware, a specifically Navajo legend.
I've heard Navajo come up a lot in in the discussion, or in what little I know about them.
Right, yeah. I don't know if other tribes had, maybe
Skinwalker
stories. Yeah, maybe. I actually didn't look into that, but now I kind of want to. I'm not gonna lie, there may be maybe a small section of a future episode where I kind of clean up a bit of the information. Like, I did a lot of research, but
Yeah, especially when it's something that, like, they're not supposed to be talked about. I imagine it's kind of hard.
Oh, absolutely.
I remember very early on, but right before you got sick, you started doing some investigating, and you turned to me and you're like, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I think it's just called, like, Traditional Navajo Teachings or something on YouTube. And there was a video of a Navajo tribe member that was talking about like the influence that Skinwalkers can have and why it's not ideal to really talk about them. In fact, as I'll get into, it's pretty taboo even for like the Navajo themselves to talk about what you like. Okay, we're getting into a lot of stuff that I'm going to talk about. So I feel like we should just dive into it.
Let's just dive into it. Let's get into it.
So I actually started my research by trying to figure out why it is difficult to find research and why it's taboo to talk about them. And it's believed that discussing them can attract their ire, seeing the speaker as somebody who knows too much about them, and the Skinwalker community could seek to eliminate that person as a potential threat.
That's terrifying. Okay.
They are kind of agents of subterfuge.
Okay.
They are very, like, working in the shadows type of group. It's also that anyone that knows enough about them to discuss them could be a skinwalker themselves, potentially ostracizing them from their own community. So, like, if somebody, you know, just openly goes around wanting to talk about skinwalkers, or just flat out is just like, yeah, here's some information about skinwalkers, like, they could kind of
be one.
Yeah, they could be seen as, like, being, for lack of a better word, sus.
Okay.
For that kind of behavior.
Okay.
They're also simply uncomfortable for most Navajo to talk about, for reasons we'll get into. So much so that a researcher, Dr. Clyde, I think his last name is pronounced Kluckhohn. I could be incorrect, but you can see it right there.
Yeah.
That's how I would say it.
That's how I would say it, but I can't say shit.
Yeah, but he had, like, he spent years with a Navajo tribe, and he had many people claim that they didn't even believe in skinwalkers until he had gotten to know them years later. Like, it's so taboo to talk about that some of them just act like they don't even know that it exists.
Oh, so, like, people who said they didn't believe in them later was like, okay, fine,
Yeah.
we'll tell you. Oh,
Yeah.
wow, okay.
Yeah. And because of all of those reasons, mostly...
You have a disclaimer.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a disclaimer for this episode.
And then once she's done with her disclaimer, I actually want to say a couple of things. I know roughly what she's going to say, but there's a couple of things that I would like to add myself.
Okay.
So we're going to get into that.
One of the big reasons, like, this is the reason that I was 50-50 on actually even making this episode in the first place, is that it's feared that talking about skinwalkers will plant such a big seed of curiosity in the listener that we could, like, learn their ways or be recruited or corrupted spiritually or physically or emotionally damaged by the simple act of discussing them. And that's why I'm putting the disclaimer here. This episode is an attempt not only to dive into what I have found out through this research as kind of a widely misunderstood idea, but I also just want people to know about, like, their true origins and what, you know, the Navajo actually think of them, and, you know, the truth behind the legend, so to speak.
Right.
This topic touches on what the Navajo see as pretty powerful dark magic, and it's seen as a very corrupting, subtle force, not just in Navajo culture, but in the world at large. So for that reason, viewer discretion is advised.
And going off of that, that's actually kind of almost a perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about. So I got a couple of things here just to kind of clear some stuff up. And honestly, like, this podcast is primarily education, but I feel like we want to kind of be seen at least a little bit as, like, an educational podcast. Like, we want to dive...
That is the hope.
Yeah, we want to dive into these topics with as little bias as possible and, like, basically maximum, like, curiosity. We are very curious people, and this type of stuff really intrigues us. But we also don't want to go around spreading any misinformation. One thing I want to say, too, is in the last episode where we talked about the Mothman, I discussed how the Mothman could potentially be a Native American curse due to an event that happened in, like, the 1700s between I think it was actually a Navajo tribe, if I remember correctly.
I think it was. What a coincidence. That was not planned.
It was Navajo and I think another one too.
Yeah.
They had, like, a big battle with the American people, and it ended up with the chief, his son, and two other tribe members being executed over a death that wasn't even their fault. And I said in that episode that anytime something creepy or spooky or whatever is happening in the U.S., you can trace it back to Native Americans just because that's the people who lived there before us. So we as humans, but also kind of especially Americans, I don't want to get too political in this, Skinwalker episode, but we're very, very good at, like, vilifying people that we want to go to war with or are going to war with. Like, we want to rationalize it. So any way that we could possibly say that they're a bad person, we're going to do. So, you know, we hear like about Native Americans having rituals, and like that to us, especially back then, was like a bad word. So like we hear about someone having rituals, we're like, oh, they're evil people. They're doing like dark magic and stuff. And that's just, you know, a lot of the times not the case. Like they have their own spiritual beliefs, which I'm sure is going to be the main topic of this, is spiritual beliefs.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what we're trying to clarify is that our intention with bringing up the white guilt was brought up out of white guilt.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm going to kind of get into a little bit of this, but like, you know, America really gave Native Americans the short end of the stick, and that's putting it extremely nicely and mildly.
From all across history, like ever since Native American has been a part of our history, it has been very tragic for them, to say the least. If you found this podcast, there's a good chance you probably already know this other one. The Dead Meat podcast is one of my favorite podcasts of all time. They mainly cover film, but they do have an early episode where they had an actual Native American person, a writer by the name of Joey Clift, on their podcast. And the topic of the episode was Indian burial grounds, that like cliche that you see or hear all the time in movies and literature and stuff. But he also does talk about like just the general treatment of Native Americans from the perspective of a Native American. And it's unfortunately not always very good. Sometimes it's bad in funny ways, like him talking about people going up and asking him if he has superpowers because, you know, Native Americans are somehow supernatural, I guess, because they have different like spiritual beliefs, but also like very unfortunate things, especially with like the government and like funding them and, you know, doing things that they probably should be doing after the stuff that we've done to them. And on the topic of spiritual beliefs, just really quickly, this is the last thing I want to cover. Me and Kirrianna are both, I would describe us as pretty spiritual people.
Oh, for sure.
We have very like strong spiritual beliefs, and even religious beliefs that are technically different between the two of us.
I would say strong but flexible. We're not
the type of people to be like, my belief is the only belief in the world.
Right.
That's the only time we actually get a little judgmental of other people's beliefs, is when they try to use that as a way of being like, yes, I am the best person because my beliefs are true and yours are not true and crazy and weird or whatever.
Yeah, when somebody, by virtue of their belief, encroaches on somebody else's belief, that's pretty much the only time we're going to judge any kind of other belief system.
Yeah, if anything, we're just curious about this kind of stuff. Like, it intrigues us. Like, I want to know, like, oh, why do you believe that? Like, what is it you believe? And, like, I would just want to know what's going on.
I would love to characterize us as optimistic truth seekers.
Yes, that is a good way of putting it. But with all of that out of the way, it is almost 15 minutes in. Jesus. I think we should talk about Skinwalkers. What did you find?
So, my first note here, and I hope to God I say this correctly, but I believe the translation of Skinwalker is pronounced Yinaldlushi. I also saw it written Nodlushi with only one L, but I believe it's Naldlushi, which just means Skinwalker, meaning they can walk in many different skins, that being mostly other animals. I actually didn't find, in my research anyway, a Skinwalker impersonating another human.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And to bring up another point, I used a book by a Dr. Clyde Kluckhohn, as I kind of referenced a bit earlier. And like I said, he spent a few years with a Navajo tribe, but he would get to know people and would have interviews with them, but he also had what he calls a check group. So he would hear something and he would like write down how many people said that thing and like how many of the details, like, you know, worked with each other, like they agreed. And then he would go back to his check group, which was like a group of people that he was closer with, that he could just like straight up ask about this kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Because like
smart.
I said, so he like reports any of the like differences in details and like how many people in the check group confirmed or denied what he heard. But it seems like coyotes and wolves were like unanimously agreed upon. Everybody was like, yeah, skinwalkers can transform into coyotes and wolves.
Okay.
Some other potential transformations that some people contested were foxes, cougars, owls, crows. So, I mean, a lot of different animals in the animal kingdom they potentially could transform into.
That's interesting, because I feel like I've heard, like, owls and crows a lot more. Like, I thought that was, like, one of their main ones.
Really?
I've definitely heard coyotes and wolves.
Yeah, I always associated skinwalkers with wolves, for sure.
Yeah, but I have heard a lot about foxes, and especially owls, which kind of makes sense in a lot of ways, as someone, like, who might not want to be seen all the time. Or,
yeah, an
like,
owl's a great one to transform into.
Yeah. They're also awesome. I love owls.
And apparently they're silent flyers too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it's great.
But I was actually telling Phinn when I was doing my research, one of the first things I think I told you actually was that skinwalkers are like true rebels. And
yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, and I don't really mean like our kind of rebel.
I was gonna ask, so are they like anti-heroes? But
no, God no.
They are just like evil.
Yeah, think of anything good within Navajo culture, like anything their culture considers good, they are the opposite.
Okay.
And that's on purpose. They're described and translated sometimes more generally as witches. I would say Phinn and I have a pretty, I would say a positive outlook on like modern witchcraft, at least good witchcraft. Like,
yeah, I've had plenty of Wiccan friends.
Yeah, I would say I've dabbled in Wicca and, had Wiccan friends. Like I kind of love it. I kind of want to get more into it.
Same.
So when I refer to them as witches, I don't really mean that kind of witch.
Would you say that is like a more like Americanized name because of like the idea of like the witch hunt, like witches being evil, especially back then?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a lot of that. I think it's also just Navajo language is so different from ours that
we just don't have a word for it.
Yeah, there's just not a like direct literal translation. So I will be making reference to witches and witchcraft, but in this context, as far as skinwalkers go, they are, said to be for sure evil, always, like always, all the time. Like there's no such thing as a good skinwalker.
Okay.
So yeah, I just wanted to get that distinction out of the way. In that book I use as a source, it seems most of the big details about skinwalkers are mostly agreed upon in most of the interviews that Dr. Clyde conducted.
Okay.
But, sometimes there are small disagreements about the finer details, and I have in my notes, how many people agreed and all that kind of stuff.
You also, I remember you talking about like the idea of there being multiple kinds of skinwalkers. So do you think that might be part of it, where like one group is maybe discussing one kind of skinwalker and another one is talking about another kind? Or
they're in the like last type that I have in order of my notes, I will actually get into a little bit of the confusion and conflation that there was with one type of skinwalker.
Okay.
But for the most part, the disagreements were just like little details about each type.
Okay.
So like this type did this, but they also did this, and then like some people would disagree. But, like I said, big details are agreed upon, little minute details sometimes somewhat disagreed upon.
Okay.
But like I said, I have in my notes like how many people disagreed and agreed and all that kind of stuff. I want to make the distinction that they are also not were animals or animal-human hybrids of any kind. I've seen some movies and stuff where there are skinwalkers, but they're basically just like werewolves.
Okay. I haven't seen any movies of Skinwalkers.
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't know about it until I did my research. But yeah, there's a lot of modern depictions where they're very werewolf-esque or were-animal-esque.
Okay.
But the distinction is that Skinwalkers, like, specifically do magic to transform into animals, and they fully transform. They're not, like, somewhere in between.
You know, one thing I just thought about that I didn't think about earlier, when you were going through that list of animals, the one that I'm just now thinking of, the animal that really comes to mind, weirdly enough, is a deer. Because I've heard so many, like, Skinwalker stories on those, like, Reddit, you know, like Darkness Prevails and Lazy Masquerade, the people who read the Reddit stories. There are so many where it's like a hunter in the woods and he sees a deer, but there's something wrong with the deer. Even
that clip where the deer comes through the brush with, like, a broken neck or something,
clip
right?
Terrifies me.
That clip is super creepy.
Like, that's so I'm a little surprised that a deer isn't in that list of animals. It wasn't even one that you, like, named off as, like, oh, maybe, but not really kind of thing.
I didn't even think about that, honestly, so I didn't even research that, but now I kind of want to go back and look, because you are so right. And I'm wondering if that's where the, like, what I'm assuming is the stereotypical depiction of a Skinwalker, which is like a half skeletonized deer or moose.
Yeah. Although I've also heard that there is another type of cryptid that is just called the not deer. Yeah, and it like looks like a deer, but then when you look at it, it doesn't look right, and there's something fucked up about it. And I think I even seen a depiction where, like, it has a mouth on its stomach or something. I don't know.
Oh God!
So I don't know if maybe they got mixed up with that or something.
I've not heard of that. Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm a little surprised. I mean, we even have the Skinwalker on our podcast logo in the bottom, I think, left-hand side. He's chilling next to you. Mm-hmm. And you drew it.
Yeah.
You drew it as, like, kind of a deer, like a fucked up looking deer.
Yeah. And I at the time, I had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't done any research. I didn't even plan on doing a Skinwalker episode, period, let alone so early. But yeah, I'm kind of thinking of replacing it with a real Skinwalker now that I actually know what they are.
Okay.
Or as, like, a little, like, I don't know, transformation or something. I was actually thinking of doing that earlier today. But yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
But regardless,
strap in. This is going to be a long episode, and I apologize.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be a long-ass episode. Get some tea, cozy up by a fireplace if you have one.
Yeah.
Turn the lights off, preferably. Get your dogs, your cats. Skinwalker magic, as I've said, everything is, you know, whatever the Navajo do. Skinwalkers are the opposite. Their magic is seen as a corruption of medicine men and women's own magic. Skinwalkers have the understanding and ability to do and be good, but they choose evil.
Okay.
For different reasons.
They wake up and choose violence.
Yes, they do. 100%. Sometimes they make this decision for power, sometimes resentment and anger, but it seems that most of the time it was done out of envy.
Envy?
Yeah, envy for, like, the Navajo themselves. The book didn't say envy out of what, but based on what they do and how and why, I would assume it's like they see somebody else doing well and they're not doing well and they want that, and they see, you know, Skinwalker life and magic as a way to get that.
Okay.
Because a lot of what they do seems to be either a fuck you to the Navajo or a way to gain money, a way to gain women, or a way to gain status. They are said to take part in some of, you know, the most taboo things like murder, cannibalism, incest, necrophilia, and just general desecration of anything the Navajo holds sacred. Stories of...
It's like most of that is things that most of the world holds sacred. I don't think there's really many places in the world that do not hold those things as, like, these are bad.
Yeah, those are pretty universal, no good things.
Yeah.
It seems that male skinwalkers are more common, but female skinwalkers are not unheard of.
Okay, that's extremely interesting.
Yeah.
Because, as I said before, we watch a lot of Twin Paranormal, and they have, like, a whole thing on skinwalkers, like a whole playlist of all the places with skinwalker activity.
Mm-hmm.
They say the exact opposite, that skinwalkers are primarily female.
Yeah, and I thought back to that when I saw that in the book, and I was like, oh, interesting, okay. And a lot of the times, if I remember correctly, I think I have a note later about this, but it's often old women.
Older women, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of stereotypical witchy vibes there.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. So to become a skinwalker, you have to either meet or know another skinwalker. You have to be accepted into their society called the Witchery Way, usually by a close family member, a romantic partner. You have to commit a murder, usually of a close family member, preferably and most often a sibling.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yes. There's also ties to a seeming fascination with siblings in, like, more of their rites and spells and stuff.
Okay.
Twin children being used for poison, and they seem to have this interesting fascination with twins.
All right.
I'll get more into that later.
Okay. I'm already, I'm just... Wow. You're not even halfway done.
Oh, not even close. I think this is page 2, my friend.
Oh, jeez.
Out of, like, 9. We're like 8 1/4, but still. So, the Witch's Sabbath. The Witch's Sabbath is something that only particular types of skinwalkers get into. The types of skinwalkers is the last thing on my list. Right now, it's just kind of a general overview of all skinwalkers, but not all of them take part in the Witch's Sabbath. But it seemed like a lot of them do, because that was like one of the first introductory things in the book. And the Witch's Sabbath is kind of an initiation ceremony. They would hold them in caves at night, preferably, away from the tribe, because usually a skinwalker still lives in the tribe, but they, do their skinwalker stuff at night, or like when they can get away. So it's
like a double life.
Yeah, 100%. And there were actually stories that I read of, like, people thinking that one of their tribe members was a skinwalker, and like stuff would happen and they couldn't figure out why, but then they were like, oh, it was probably, what's his face down the way, because he wasn't in his hut last night, or
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, they call them Hogans, but that's also for the future. But yeah, they would meet in caves at night. They are reported to have sat mostly naked, wearing just masks, jewelry, and they had like ceremonial body paint.
Okay.
They would sit in a circle surrounded by rows of decapitated human heads and either piles or baskets full of like just corpse flesh.
Okay.
Very big fascination with death and the use of like dead tissue and like grave dirt in a lot of their like rituals and magic.
That, as far as I know, which is again not a whole lot when it comes to Native American culture, but to my knowledge, that is something that the Native American culture just kind of has, where like when they go and they hunt an animal, they want to use all the parts of the animal as much as they can. Like, they'll use the bones to make tools or even jewelry. They use all of the meat for however many reasons they can use it for. They might even use the bones to make food, like, what's it called? Bone marrow and stuff like that.
Yep.
Antlers for, again, tools and jewelry and stuff. So that idea of them being, like, fascinated with death is just, it really does seem like what you said earlier. It's the traditions of Navajo just flipped on its head and made fucked up.
Yeah, and not even like just using all parts of the animal like in a respectful way and then flipping that, but also, especially at least the Navajo, because that's all I really studied. They also had like I'll get into the idea of what's called a ghost Hogan in a bit, but essentially it was like so much reverence for somebody that died in their house that they just like leave it completely untouched. Like death to them was, you kind of just stay away from it. Preferably they would get to like a person before they would die and bring them outside so that their ghost didn't get stuck in their Hogan.
Ooh, okay.
Which is basically just where they lived. Yeah. So, like, they were very reverential of their dead. And then you've got skinwalkers that are just, like, mixing up poultices of dead corpse bits to, like, do their rituals and stuff on a regular basis.
Wow.
Yeah. Some reports suggest that they would make sand paintings, and that's a big Navajo thing. Sand paintings were used. I think you saw me watching a video
I saw them. They're really cool.
Yeah, they're awesome. That's just like colored sand and different, things that are ground up to look like sand. And they like the video that I saw, the guy is literally just like using his fingers to like
sprinkle it around,
sprinkle dust like in sand in a particular way of like a bunch of different bright colors to make a painting. It was really cool. But
go look that up. It's Navajo sand paintings are actually really cool.
Yeah, they're really awesome. I love them. But they would use theirs kind of in like a stereotypical voodoo doll way. That's kind of debated as to whether they would do it like that. But I saw a lot of reports that they would use sand paintings for some kind of negativity. Often they would depict their intended victim with them. And either would, like, put their waist on the painting of the victim, or would, like, shoot something onto the picture, or something. It's just kind of this, like, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Yeah, they would put their intentions into it, but I'm thinking, it's like an analog for that person.
Right.
In general, just representative of manifesting negativity for the victim, basically. Right. And often it seemed there was a hierarchy of, like, leader chief witches, the high-ranking members that led the ceremonies.
Okay.
And they were perceived as rich, the book said, so I don't know if they actually were rich or they just, put out that vibe and look so that people thought they were. But they had helpers that were basically, like, pretty much slaves, it seems like. It said that they were so poor that it was considered a necessity that they help the skinwalkers as a matter of self-preservation.
Oh wow, it's like almost giving me like mafia gangster vibes or something, where it's like yeah. I mean, like, in a way where it's kind of these people that can barely stand up for themselves or defend themselves or anything.
Yeah,
and they have to just help out these other people that they don't even want to help out, but like, what else are they gonna do?
Yeah, and it didn't go into detail as to what that meant exactly, but I don't know if it's like they had nowhere else to go, so this was like their way to survive, or if they didn't help, like, harm would befall them.
I would imagine it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I'm assuming it's probably a bit of both. Definitely a fucked up dynamic, which seems to also be like a reversal of Navajo beliefs, because family was very important to Navajo. Like, they're very helpful to each other. They're very reverential of just the idea of community. And in fact, when we would put them in like camps and stuff and try to do like cultural, like, feeding them American culture, like trying to get them to be more individualistic was like literally part of like a training regiment.
Oh yeah, that's in that last other podcast I was talking about, the Dead Meat podcast. That was something that was talked about a little bit.
Oh, really?
Where, like, government putting, Native American people in these, like, camps and trying to force them to be more American. And, like, they would, like, I mean, for lack of a better word, like, literally beat it into them if they weren't following that kind of idea. So, yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah. Usual Navajo ceremonies involved promoting health and harmony with nature, whereas Skinwalker ceremonies, they were the antithesis of that. Chaos and destruction incarnate, pretty much. Everything they did was an inversion of the traditional Navajo way of life. Attempting to unravel the balance that the Navajo worked so hard to create, They even attempted to disrupt the harmony of nature itself.
Oh,
Like
wow.
anything they could corrupt, they would go after it. And the medicine men and women, they could fight these imbalances with some success. That's actually part of their fear of skinwalkers, is that sometimes attempts to cure or treat, like, what they didn't have 100% efficacy. Sometimes the issues would be so far out of proper balance that they could only restore so much. Sometimes they just couldn't fully treat an illness or something that happened.
I was gonna say, like, what kind of like things are we talking about? Like, are they making people sick? Are they killing people? Like, I mean, I know you were talking about murder and stuff, but like, is that the type of stuff they would do?
Sickness, spiritual instability, loss of property and wealth, almost anything you can think of.
Wow.
And
I'm guessing also probably like talking about like messing with nature, like probably even being able to make it to where like, maybe crops didn't grow or something like
yes.
that. And
yes, absolutely. Sometimes I think I have this further in my notes too, but sometimes like pests to crops were believed to have been brought by skinwalkers. Not as much killing as you would think.
oh, okay.
Especially because, they needed something. They were trying to
Right.
gain something from the, negativity that they caused. So usually they would not outright kill somebody unless that was a way to get what they wanted.
Okay.
So it's not unheard of, but it's not as common as you would think. And that's my next note. They gain their power by taking it from others, stealing their prosperity and peace. Weak, sick, and poor, often motivated by envy. Eventually, they would gain more powerful abilities, gaining the ability to transform into a number of animal forms, which led to them being confused with werewolves. Yeah, we kind of already touched on that. I keep remembering what I'm trying to say before I have it in my notes.
Right.
And then I just kind of go into a lot of like depictions and stories of skinwalkers I've seen. Like, people are attacked while a skinwalker is in animal form. Their transforming into animals was like almost always an attempt at stealth.
Okay.
So usually if they wanted to directly cause harm to somebody, it would be in human form.
Oh, so they would just attack you as a person.
Right. And 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't just come at you. Like, they are, they're trying to chameleon into society and like bring it down from the inside, essentially taking as much as they can from whoever they can without being found out. Because then if they're found out, I mean, the Navajo, everybody else is going to want to deal with that threat.
Right.
Instead, they would use a variety of different tactics depending on which type of skinwalker it is. One of them being poison or like bad medicine, because medicine men would use like herbs and stuff to,
right, and they would use a poisonous herb.
Exactly. This poison often being made from dead flesh. Children were better. Young twins were the most potent.
Oh, that's so morbid.
It's very morbid. It's awful. There was also, I didn't write this down in my notes, but I remember it being mentioned a few times that what Dr. Clyde describes as the whirl of the head, WHORL, being like another one of the like most commonly used ingredients, which I'm assuming is like where your calic is, kind of, up on the top back of your head. I'm not sure either, but these poisons would be, like I said, made from often corpses, and they would be administered in a variety of very sly ways, including blowing powder into a person's face, like in the commotion of a crowd, or placed in the nose or mouth of a sleeping person. Sometimes they would even put powdered poison in like what is basically the chimney of a Hogan. Sometimes even put in cigarettes. Any way they could figure out to get it in somebody's body, they would do it.
Wow, okay.
Serious side effects are said to often kick in very quickly, including a swollen black tongue, having lockjaw, or just somebody passing out immediately.
Oh, jeez.
Some serious stuff. It wasn't always that serious, but it could be.
Is this poison fatal, or is it like supposed to be a mostly fatal poison? Do you know?
It depends on what they're trying to do. It depends on what they're trying to get. If they need you dead, it can kill you probably pretty damn quick. But if they just need you sick and out of the way, they could do that too.
Okay. Because I remember watching Deadliest Warrior back when that was like a show.
Yeah.
I forget what warrior they were talking about, but they had a warrior who had like a powder that they used. Again, I can't remember the type of warrior, but it was some kind of powder that they would have crushed up and they would like blow it in your face. But I think that one was made for like being like a blinding thing. It was supposed to be like a pepper spray.
Pocket sand.
Yeah, pocket sand. But it was like actually like stuff that would really mess with your eyes. Like if you would like squeeze, you know, a hot pepper in your eye type of shit. Like that.
Like an irritant or something?
Yeah, it was supposed to be like an irritant.
Oh, that sounds awful. Especially in the middle of battle.
Right.
Oh, panic inducing. And then, yeah, my next note is, but sometimes symptoms were slow. It was like a wasting process. This poison and negative magic could slowly drain victims until they progressed to the point where, you know, the medicine men and women just couldn't do anything about it. Or at least all they could do is, you know,
make you comfortable.
Yeah,
that's the last thing you want to be is comfortable.
Exactly. Oh god, yeah. In a medical context, that is the last thing you want to be. They could also use curses. And again, sometimes that depends on the type of skinwalker. And those could also range in aggressiveness from just straight up inducing insanity to sometimes just causing you to be more accident prone. They could just curse you to be clumsy.
A clumsy curse.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. What's wrong with you? You used to be so good. Like you used to like have your equilibrium, but now you're just falling all over the place and knocking stuff off the tables.
It's like you're using banana peels as shoes. They would also like just legit run scams on people.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they would. A skinwalker would poison or curse an individual, and then they would sell them a cure from like a fake medicine man. So they would make them sick, and then would have them keep coming back to a medicine man to get them cured. But the medicine man was in on it, or a skinwalker himself.
Yeah, but just like selling them some fucking water.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, here's some bloodletting and a leech suck.
Wow.
You're better for today. That's all we can do. Their methods were more methodical and subtle. Like I said, almost subterfuge in a way. The Navajo would watch out for specific signs of like skinwalker activity and like their presences. Those would be investigative. Signs such as unusual sounds or smells, dirt falling into a Hogan smoke hole, like, you know, they were trying to put the poison down the chimney. Right. Unusually large animal tracks leading from one dwelling to another, because apparently it is said that when a skinwalker transforms into an animal, that animal is often bigger than their regular counterpart.
Yes, I have heard of that before. Like, people just saying, like, it was definitely a coyote, but it was a big-ass coyote. Like,
interesting. I had never heard that.
I have heard of that. In some of those stories, people will talk about, like, again, like, especially the coyotes and wolves, but they're just, like, unnaturally big. And, like, I know what a coyote looks like. I've seen them in real life from being a hunter in real life.
Yeah.
So I know, like, they're not tiny, you know, they're probably around the size of like a German Shepherd or like a fairly large dog. But
okay.
I've heard of people saying, like, you know, coyotes that were like as big as or even bigger than like wolves and shit. And that's a terrifying. Yeah, they're like, you know, around 150, maybe even 200 pounds, depending on the type of wolf.
Jesus.
So, yeah, that'd be terrifying. Or, you know, seeing a wolf that's twice its normal size.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's, like, you know, as intelligent as a human being and has access to dark magic.
Yeah, that's... Oh, no thanks.
No, thank you. Often, when a skinwalker was caught, they're reported to have attempted to essentially buy their freedom with, like, money or jewelry, precious gems, which is often met with just a straight-up reaction of horror. And they're then shot on site.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, like, skinwalkers are like a person.
Yes.
Then, because, like, again, we were talking about the the Twin Paranormal videos where they investigate skinwalkers.
Yeah.
They seem, at least to them, like they treat them as like a spiritual being.
Yeah.
So they are real. And one of the things that I've heard them say is like the only way to kill a skinwalker is to know their name. That doesn't seem like it's like a case. It seems like you can just bop and they're gone.
In my research, there didn't seem to be any like special way you had to kill them. Like there was no, wooden stake or silver bullet type of thing.
You just shoot them.
Yeah, you just shoot them. They have access to powerful magic, but they are still human. I mean, if you get a good shot off, they gonna die.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are, at least in actual Navajo lore, as far as I have been able to see, regular ass humans.
Okay.
But there's this interesting dynamic of the Navajo being wary of their own tribe members when they, see or hear anything that could be skinwalker activity, or, they suspect somebody to be a skinwalker. Obviously, it wasn't like the witch trials level of anything, but it was a consideration. Like yeah, the blood test. But because of their secrecy in nature, like I said before, they would often discover a skinwalker they had dealt with the night before was their own neighbor.
Wow.
Yeah, so imagine, killing what you know is a skinwalker in, like, animal form, and then you show up day after tomorrow and, Bill down the street is just gone, and everybody's like, where'd Bill go? And there's just, like, big old wolf tracks coming out of his Hogan.
Oh, my God.
I mean, obviously, he probably wouldn't have been named Bill, but...
Right. It's a funny name, though.
It is. Not all skinwalkers took part in all of the aforementioned methods and behaviors. And this is where I'm going to get into the different types of skinwalkers. But I just wanted to ask if you had any questions so far, because that is just kind of that's just the general overview of skinwalkers.
There's a lot, actually. Because my biggest thing I'm thinking of now is, like you said, you've been talking all this about skinwalkers are just regular, they're not really regular, but they're just people who are just evil and have this access to this dark magic and everything, and are, just agents of chaos. But then when I think of a skinwalker, especially with like Twin Paranormal and stuff, because Twin Paranormal, they go to these places, and again, assuming that this is, they're not like making up this stuff, which I don't even know how they would in some of the situations they're in. They always seem to get activity.
And that activity seems to line up with what they believe about skinwalkers, too.
Yeah, it seems like it's this idea of like skinwalkers are like a spiritual being. So that makes me think of, are they like, is that like a skinwalker who has died and is now continuing to be a skinwalker in the afterlife?
I thought about this topic, but I did not think about that possibility.
Yeah.
Because there are, like, Navajo do have legends about ghosts.
Yeah, I think almost every single culture does.
Oh, I'm sure.
I can't think of any culture that doesn't have this idea of, like, a spirit that, like, wanders the earth after being killed because it can't move on or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Or just doesn't want to or something.
Right. So, honestly, I wouldn't be too terribly surprised. I now that you say that, wish I would have dove into... like
you have so much here already.
I know that's true. Yeah, but I do kind of wish I would have been more knowledgeable as to what they believe about ghosts, because I didn't go into that at all. But it could be. Because I was even gonna bring that up to you. It was like, what do you think of like their encounters and ideas about skinwalkers and how different it is?
Yeah.
And before you said what you just said about them possibly just being dead skinwalkers, I was going to wonder if it was like just a similar but different phenomenon altogether.
Yeah, that was another thing is like, I mean, I talked a lot again about like Old Corpse Husband and like Darkness Prevails and Sir Spooks, or maybe not Sir Spooks, he does like videos, but like Lazy Masquerade and all these people who do like the Reddit horror stories. I feel like there seems to be a little bit of a understanding that probably most, or at least some of these stories aren't true. But I feel like, that there are probably some stories that are true, like people actually having these weird encounters. And they're talking about what we talked about in the beginning, where it's like like this supposed skinwalker that's like mimicking, their mother, or mimicking like their brother or sister or whatever, to try to like lure them outside. And that's something that even Twin Paranormal talks about, is like they talk about them whistling to try to like, or calling for help to try to get people to come over.
Yeah, or like screaming like they're in pain.
Yeah, so that makes me wonder, if that's not a skinwalker, what is that? Like, is that just something else we don't have a name for?
Maybe doppelganger.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know, because that's part of why I wanted to do this episode, is because I had heard so many stories of skinwalkers growing up, but, their lore seemed to be kind of muddy, so I wanted to dive deep and figure out, like...
Wanted to sift through that mud.
Yeah, exactly.
pull out the diamonds of truth.
100%. Couldn't have said it better myself. So,
now we get the subclasses.
Yeah, the subclasses. Yeah, you picked your main class as Skinwalker, but you have some specializations you can go into. Dr. Clyde uses, like, specific names for different types of Skinwalkers. I don't think the names for them are,
actually given. They're just made up.
Yeah, well, I think they are attempts at translating Navajo tongue.
Okay.
But they're not, like, direct translation.
Fair enough. Language is very weird.
Yes. But for the purpose of simplicity, I'm just going to use the terms that he does.
Okay.
The first type of Skinwalker being a sorcerer.
Okay. High DPS.
High DPS, range damage, usually squishy. Yep, exactly. So the next one now. Sorcerers, they do a, funny enough, very stereotypically witchy thing.
Okay.
They use personal effects or images of a person to cast spells on them from a distance. These personal effects being like hair, nails, bodily waste, any kind of like, biologically connected to you items from your person, or like personal.
I was just about to ask, does it have to be like from your body, or can it be like your favorite clothing or jewelry or something like that?
I believe it can also be possessions.
Okay.
Oh yeah. They will then bury whatever, item that they're using to cast a spell on you in an actual grave or under a lightning-struck tree.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
I haven't seen very many of those around, but...
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you live closer to nature.
I guess, yeah, that kind of stuff can happen more.
I would assume.
Yeah, maybe.
A sorcerer will then use a chant or prayer as an incantation on the victim, often setting a specific time period in which the effects of the spell are supposed to take place. Sometimes the incantation is literally like a medicine man prayer, just spoken in reverse.
Oh, wow, okay.
There are other variations sorcerer employ as well, such as cutting open a toad's stomach and inserting a charm and saying a spell as a way to target a pregnant woman.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, kind of fucked up. Using a sand painting of a person, as mentioned previously.
Like the voodoo type.
Yeah, the voodoo type, at least the stereotypical voodoo type. Did they actually use voodoo dolls? Is that even a thing? I could have sworn somewhere I heard that wasn't a thing. Tangent, but I'm curious.
Who? Like the Navajo?
The like voodoo practitioners.
I don't know enough about voodoo to say one way or the other. One thing I will say is, I don't think that would be unheard of, because you're talking about like this magic that they're doing, like casting these rituals. I have gone down like witchcraft rabbit holes and have studied some like actual witchcraft and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Dabbled myself a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And that is something that's like the main thing that seems to be with any practice, like spiritual belief or religion or whatever, is that magic is often just intention.
Right.
And so the tools that you use are just like, you can use essentially whatever as long as that intention is there.
Right.
But obviously using, like, in this case, you know, some, like, an actual body part of the person, like if you can get their actual hair or their actual nails or whatever, then it kind of strengthens that, because now there is an actual connection, like spiritually and physically.
Right.
So this idea, like, you're kind of describing some of these rituals, and I'm like, this is very close to what I've seen with, like, Wiccan or even, like, Satanism or anything like that, where, like, it's just the way they do it is so similar to what I have actually, like, has seen and, like, have read and stuff like that. It's actually really interesting that that's the case. So this idea of, like, using a sand painting to kind of, like, envision the person, like, I've heard of people, that's one way that, like, certain Wiccans who maybe practice in a little bit of black magic and do curses, they'll get a photo of someone and, like, burn it in a burning bowl with, like, you know, maybe like some type of sage or, like, you know, other kind of ingredient to, like, symbolize making sure this person gets sick or, like, loses their job or something like that.
Right. Okay.
It's just that, to me, that's very interesting that their magic doesn't seem to be very different to, like, magic that I actually have researched myself and dabbled with.
I thought the same thing when I read about sorcery. Was, you know, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
There are, from Dr. Clyde's research, 4 sparse reports of effigies being used and being poked or shot with projectiles in that fashion, like using an analog of the victim to represent and manifest harm through magical means. But because of the lack of numbers in reporting that particular practice, it's possible that this report came from Spanish speakers sharing stories of, like, the doll technique, like we were talking about in voodoo, or, you know, similar practices. Another researcher named Richard Van Valkenburg reported to Dr. Kluckhohn that he had evidence of a cave painting, but this is unconfirmed, and the lack of, you know, multiple reports makes it seem like an isolated practice at best, and potentially just a, you know, kind of carryover from a different culture that had interacted with the Navajo.
Right.
So the ritual of using a person's personal effects or parts of their body to
do their magic.
Yeah, is pretty much widely agreed upon, but, like, the sand painting idea is potentially just not a thing, or an isolated incident, like I said.
Gotcha.
Some informants reported that Skinwalker sorcerers had, like, a particular power aiding them, kind of like a familiar, but instead of, like, an animal, it was more like a natural process or element. For example, I just lost my place in my notes. For example, earth, sun, lightning, darkness, bear, owl, snake, just some kind of natural element that assists the spellcaster.
Ah, yes, the element of snake.
Bear, owl. So, sorcery can also target more than just a singular person. Kind of like we were talking about before with the crops.
Right.
And, like, pests attacking crops, and that being believed to be, you know, a Skinwalker spell. Animals, somebody's, like, personal property, not just used, but can also be attacked by a spell. Or entire groups or communities of people can be targets of a spell.
Jeez.
So it's not just, you know, one person. It can they can pretty much target anything. Some of the Czech group reported that sorcerers aren't aided by an element of nature. There was some disagreement on whether or not that was a thing. Others refuted that sorcery spells have the ability to kill, but that they just cause illness or hardship of some kind. Not all of them,
like
but some.
Indirect killing, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
You were talking about the idea that they have these, like, almost familiars. That is something, one of the few things that I do know about some Native American cultures. I don't know if, I think it actually does apply to the Navajo, but the idea of spirit animals.
Oh.
And again, you were talking about Skinwalkers kind of taking Navajo traditions and then kind of flipping it around and like making it evil or fucked up in some way.
Uh-huh.
So that's exactly what that made me think of, is this idea that they have like this idea of a spirit animal that helps them, but for negative purposes.
Oh, interesting. I'd love to pick your brain about that later, because I don't know jack about that.
I only know a little bit.
Okay.
But it's a little. They talked about it in the Dead Meat podcast episode. We should just watch that.
We should, yeah.
I think you would like it. It's very interesting, and he talks about a little bit about that kind of stuff.
I remember being around while you were watching that video and catching bits and pieces of it, and it seemed really interesting.
It's really cool. Dead Meat podcast, huge inspiration to this podcast too.
Yeah,
just
for sure.
Yeah, love you, James and Chelsea.
But yeah, on the whole, sorcery just seems to have the perception that it was somehow less catastrophic than other forms of Skinwalker magic.
Interesting.
I don't know if that has to do with, the kind of trying to influence things through the ether nature of it or what,
okay.
But I think a lot of it is just like the lack of direct harm. And I would this is just kind of me speculating, but I'm assuming also, like, if you have magic versus magic, it's a bit easier to fight than, like, a physical poison, because,
right.
You have medicine men, and their magic is an inversion of, medicine man magic, so, like, there are things that can be done, but there are other types of skinwalkers that we'll get into now that we're seen as, more feared.
We made like the role playing game joke of like your main class and this is your subclass. It sounds to me like sorcerer is closer to something like a warlock from like certain games, like certain RPGs that I played, where like their magic is mainly like debuffs and damage over time type shit. So,
yeah, wow.
So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I didn't think we'd go back to that analogy, but it's pretty apt actually. Yeah, that's fucking funny. The next subclass you could specialize in is wizardry.
Okay.
Navajo that spoke English colloquially referred to these kinds of witches as bean shooters.
Okay.
They did not actually, in reality, shoot any type of bean.
I was just gonna ask, like, a little blowgun, just loaded up with jelly beans.
Hell yeah. Wizards are a particular sect of skinwalkers that use some sort of propelled projectile to maim and cast spells on people. They would use a variety of ammunition, one of which being ashes from what's called a ghost Hogan.
You mentioned those,
like I was talking about earlier, yeah. I actually have a whole quote from a website that I found, because I just didn't feel like me paraphrasing it would do it justice. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to read the quote directly. Go for it. In Navajo culture, when a person dies inside a Hogan, the traditional Navajo house, it is believed that the person's spirit, known as what I'm assuming you would say Chindi, can remain trapped in the built structure and potentially cause ghost sickness, an affliction that can manifest in physical or mental illness. Because the Navajo take great care to avoid any contact with dead bodies and the deceased person's possessions, generally when people are nearing the moment of death, they're brought outside of the Hogan to die in the open, which will release the Chindi into the world to disperse. In the case that someone dies indoors, the dwelling must be vacated and abandoned, and the family constructs a new Hogan elsewhere. In order to enable the release of the lingering Chindi in the old Hogan, a hole is created in the northern wall of the Hogan. This hole functions as a mark indicating that the structure is contaminated by death and is never to be inhabited again. End quote. And I believe the author here is referring to ashes from a ghost Hogan, insofar as the skinwalker uses a deceased person's own belongings or their ashes, like from the corpse, I guess.
Either that, or I was also thinking, like, if they actually like dug out like a hole, maybe like the pieces of the wall, like after it's been dug out or something like that. That's what I thought of anyway. That's
Maybe.
like what went through my mind.
Maybe, because it didn't say. It just said ashes from a ghost Hogan, comma, the next type of ammunition. So I just kind of, I tried to figure out, like, you know, directly what that meant, but this is the closest thing I could find. In any case, obviously it's something from a dead person's Hogan, either the body itself or the Hogan or the dirt that the person died in, maybe.
That could also be.
Just, you know, more evidence of further reversal of Navajo beliefs as its own kind of spiritual ammunition.
Yeah.
They would also use beads, especially ones that were owned by the intended victim.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Teeth or bones from a corpse. Sand from an anthill. That's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
Bits of a yucca plant. Do you know what a yucca plant is?
I know what they are. I've never had one or
seen one.
Yeah.
They're native to Colorado. There's a lot of yucca
really?
around here, yeah.
Okay.
But you know about yucca plants. They have like little thorns.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big leaves.
They're I'm pretty sure they're one of the things that you can get from Stranded Deep. I'm not even joking. Like, I think that's where I know them from.
That's awesome. But yeah, if we go out into the mountains, I'll show you some yucca and make sure you watch out because bitches are pokey.
Okay.
They would use porcupine quills.
Also pokey.
Olivella shells, which I didn't know what that was, but it's basically like a kind of snail shell.
Oh.
They're pretty small and they're kind of pointed.
Snails are actually dangerous.
What?
They're I think in the top 10 animals that like kill humans the most because they have like parasites and stuff in them.
Really?
Yeah, they're in like the top, they might even be top 5 of like animals that are most deadly to humans and that they cause the most deaths each year.
But they're so cute.
They are, but they're dangerous. So be careful.
Accidentally poke an eye stalk and you're just like suck into their heads. I used to catch and pet snails when we would go to the nature center.
It's specific types of snails.
Oh, okay.
I think it's like freshwater snails maybe are the more dangerous ones.
Interesting.
I could have that backwards, so don't quote me on that. Don't go around petting snails and being like, Phinn told me it was okay.
But yeah, Olivella shells they're pretty small and they have like one kind of rounded edge and then like the other one kind of extends to a point. They're kind of oval shaped with one end being very pointy.
So like, do they like throw them like a throwing knife type thing and get that pokey bit in there?
I'll get into that.
Okay.
That's a great mental image though.
Like a shuriken.
Shuriken. They would apparently also use deer hair and wildcat whiskers.
Both also pokey.
But I don't know how the mechanics of that work. I mean, we'll get into that. I guess with one form of projection, it could work perfectly, which we'll get into. They would also use fragments of rock that were burned from a sweat bath, basically like a
sauna?
Like a sauna, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Which were used in like purification rituals.
Oh.
Yeah, so just, further taking something that's considered holy and then taking it for their own kind of negative magic. Some people reported that the objects were shot through a tube, so like you were thinking kind of like a blowgun, situation. But most reported the objects were placed in a basket or cloth and made to fly through the air by means of an incantation.
What?
So they would literally, if I'm understanding the language here correctly, because that book was written in like the 1900s, so the language is a bit outdated. But yeah, they would literally like place it on like a ceremonial piece of cloth or a basket, and then apparently by means of incantation, which I'm assuming they would just cast some sort of spell or say some sort of chant, and would literally like levitate the bitch and yeet it at motherfuckers.
That's crazy.
Could you imagine? Almost all reports describe wizards as old men. 10 of the Czech group reported that women could perform wizardry.
Okay.
So, I don't know if anybody had known a Skinwalker that was female that could perform wizardry, but I suppose from the Czech group it's possible. And then in the book, all it says, as for the
You
cure,
see that quote? What the hell?
and I quote, sucking was the special cure for this type of witchcraft.
I can only imagine that's like the snake bite thing.
Yeah,
the
that's
idea of like sucking the poison out.
Right.
Because I'm imagining now that you were talking about, shooting things through a tube or something like that, that they would have some kind of poison on the item that they shot.
Right.
And then like you would have to like suck the poison out like with a snake bite, which I don't even know if that actually works.
It does not. Don't do that. It's dangerous for you.
I feel like you could swallow it.
Yeah, you could swallow it. It gets absorbed into your salivary glands, I believe. Sucking out poison does not work. Don't do it. Take them to a hospital.
What about the pens? Because I saw that before, where like they have like a pen that it's like a suction, and like you put it on your body and then like pull up on a thing, and it's like it causes a suction.
My knowledge with that is limited to Coyote Peterson videos.
I've seen him do it. That's where I got it from.
Yeah, I don't know like how high the efficacy is for that with snake bites. Because when he uses it, it's mostly just to like take
bee stings and stuff,
yeah,
right?
it's insects usually, and it's also usually just to take the edge off.
Okay.
And usually like what he's getting stung by isn't deadly.
It's just painful.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, of course it's safer for the sucker because there's no risk of, getting poisoned yourself. But I don't know, I don't know how effective that is. I don't know if that would even do anything for you.
Fox and Fish podcast. We don't know anything about survivalism. We know about the spooks and the creeps.
I do know you shouldn't drink your own pee. Or eat your own limbs for sustenance.
That's okay. Next topic.
Pee is not sterile, people.
Next topic.
With this type of magic, the Navajo would often seek aid from other tribes as opposed to the Navajo themselves, such as the Hopi tribe I remember was referenced. And I don't know, it didn't say why that was. It might have something to do with the fact that wizard sect of Skinwalkers seems to be of more recent origin. Some reporting that they were told by Mexicans or Pueblo Indians. So it might be just the fact that, the other tribes knew more about that kind of magic and therefore could do more about it.
That would make sense to me. I wonder if also it's a possibility is that maybe these types of skinwalkers are often from other tribes and purposely go after opposing tribes that they feel like wouldn't know about that kind of magic.
Oh,
I wonder if that's a possibility.
Because then their magic would be more effective against people that don't know about it.
Right.
And they would also be able to cover their tracks better.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Like if you want to take down a water Pokemon, you're not going to use Charmander. You're going to go for Pikachu,
I choose you!
That's the extent of my Pokemon knowledge.
However, 15 from the Czech group refuted that they were of recent origin and asserted that they had been known for a while.
Okay.
So, I believe the Czech group was 30 members plus. So
almost half.
Almost half, yeah.
Or maybe even half, okay.
Yeah. And we see kind of further down like a difference in opinion between different age groups too.
So like older people would say something, but then the younger people would say no?
Correct.
Okay.
Something like that, yeah.
Interesting.
So, even among the Navajo, not everybody, agrees on everything. So
I mean, people are people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, that's just gonna happen.
Right.
Regardless of what group of people you're asking. But yeah, he didn't go into as very much more detail about why they would seek from other tribes, so that's just kind of my speculation.
Fair.
Surprisingly, wizards do not have the ability to shapeshift into animals.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
They can levitate objects and fling them at people, but they either cannot or just simply do not shapeshift into animals, and they also don't participate in the witches' Sabbath according to most reports, although some said that they could. But according to most reports, they cannot shapeshift and don't do the witches' Sabbath.
Interesting.
Yeah.
that just makes me feel like maybe it is like opposing tribes, because you mainly went into the Navajo.
Right.
I believe, just from my thinking through this, it seems like maybe wizards aren't a part of the Navajo Skinwalkers, but maybe the Navajo know them because they're from another tribe that attacks the Navajo for the reasons that we said earlier, where it's like, oh, these people don't know about this magic, so they might not have the cure for it.
Yeah.
Because that would just make the most sense is, go for somebody who doesn't understand what you're doing, and they're not going to have the proper defenses because they don't know about it that much.
Like taking a Gatling gun to a medieval warfare.
That would be very effective, I imagine.
I would imagine. I also wonder if it's partially, if that is kind of a newer sect of Skinwalkers, if they, like, the Witch's Sabbath and transforming into animals is kind of like the old ways, and they're kind of bringing in, like, the new ways, you know what I mean?
Oh, that's another interesting thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like they don't transform into animals for the reasons that we would normally assume based on stories that especially me and you have heard, where, you said before, people talking about getting attacked by an animal that they believe was a skinwalker. It seems like they use, the animal thing to try to be sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
Which then makes me wonder, like, if the animals they're transforming into is always bigger, is that really that much more sneaky? Because then you're like, why is that coyote as tall as me?
Yeah. Maybe that's what Mothman was just a giant owl. Just a giant skinwalker owl.
Maybe.
That's a terrifying thought.
That's a very terrifying thought.
But 17 people from the Czech group, upon asking, they didn't volunteer this information without asking, but when asked, they confirmed that they had heard reports of wizards shooting objects into sand painting effigies with what they call a witch bow. Like I said, that's only 17 of the Czech group, and evidence for that kind of goings-on is pretty sparse.
Okay.
If not just one semi-unconfirmed report.
Right.
I mean, that report was from somebody that was, studying Navajo, but still.
Yeah. Gotta take what we can.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But either way, that's kind of the overview on wizards.
Okay, I'm just reading this this other type of skinwalker that you have here.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a very interesting one, and one that Dr. Clyde talks about in what I kind of assume to be kind of a beat around the bush way.
Okay.
As you can see from the title and the time period that the book was written in as to why.
Yeah, it was, you said early 1900s?
Yeah, it was, let me look here, 1967.
Oh, okay. We're okay.
Yeah. Late 60s.
That's, oh, right. Why don't you tell the people what it is?
So the next section is called Prostitution Way and Frenzy Witchcraft, which are kind of two different things.
Okay.
Technically, it's actually three different things, but they are related and, like, correlated, you know what I mean? And I feel like even I, in my research, got a little bit confused, but I'm 99% sure that I have it straight in my notes right now.
Okay.
But like I said, it can refer to three things. Number one, a form of witchcraft involving using plants to perform what Dr. Clyde puts in quotes called love magic, or to attain success in gambling and trading. This kind of witchcraft is what I referred to as frenzy witchcraft.
Okay.
Prostitution Way was a chant or ceremony used to cure or abate the effects caused by using frenzy magic on somebody, referred to as the Prostitution Way Chant. It could also be a form of divination using plants, especially datura, which I always want to pronounce as datura for some reason, which is also used in frenzy witchcraft. The book refers to this as datura divination specifically.
Okay.
Datura is a plant that has been used by humanity for hundreds of years. It's sometimes used as a very strong poison. The effects take some time to show, around half an hour minimum.
All right.
Could be longer. But also recreationally and spiritually used as a strong hallucinogen. If you find yourself
I see your next quote.
in this situation where you have the opportunity to take it as a hallucinogen, I would advise you not to. Partially just because I don't want to be an influencer that, endorses drug use, for one. But for two, if it's kind of like blowfish, you know what I mean? Where it has to be prepared properly, and it's very specific. Like, it's like time of the year, conditions where it was grown, the way that you take it are very particular for it to be taken as just a pure hallucinogen. Shit can kill you, and its effects are awful. It's got so many side effects. I was going to put the side effects in here, but there are just so many. I mean, it basically just shuts your system down.
Wow. I was going to, compare it to, I've heard about people taking, a bunch of, Benadryl and then, seeing spiders and stuff because it's, what's that called? Deliriant?
Yes.
It's forcing you to see bad things, and I was thinking of something like that.
Not quite. It is kind of similar, I guess, in the way that the the hallucinations tend to be very
negative.
Not negative necessarily, but it's like a very bad delirium. It's very intense. It's very you lose your connection to reality, and you pretty much lose your ability to tell reality from the hallucinations.
Oh my god!
This is like some Alice in Wonderland down the rabbit hole type shit.
Don't do drugs.
Just don't do drugs. Only the good kinds. Even as just a pure hallucinogen, it's very strong. Even among the Navajo, people seem to confuse and conflate these three things because they are so interrelated. And in Dr. Clyde's research, people were even more reluctant to talk about Prostitution Way and frenzy witchcraft, even more so than just the idea of skinwalkers in general.
Oh.
There's a rule in Navajo culture to never speak of witchcraft in front of women and children. Dr. Clyde reports that this rule was often unheeded in the case of speaking about the other forms of witchcraft, but when frenzy witchcraft and Prostitution Way were brought up, women and children were almost always religiously, just taken out of the picture.
Yeah, they were okay, big kid talk.
Yeah, they were shooed away immediately before any conversation happened. The only exception being women who had previously been treated by the Prostitution Way Chant, but never children.
Okay, wow. See, I saw the words Prostitution Way. I thought we were going to talk about some sex magic or something, or is that coming up?
That's coming up.
Oh, okay, interesting. I
think that's one of the things that Dr. Clyde was kind of, in my opinion, skirting around really hard.
Right.
He kind of goes into it a little bit, but not very much. Information about that was pretty sparse. I looked at multiple sources for that part.
Gotcha.
But yeah, he has significantly less successful attempts of being able to discuss that topic with people. In fact, he had some people report that there was, in fact, no such chant by the name of Prostitution Way and that it didn't exist. But he was able to find 17 people that confirmed its existence, and he interviewed them. He noticed that this is what I'm talking about, where I was saying there is an instance of an age gap.
Right.
In people knowing about something or being able to talk about one of his, topics that he wanted to bring up. There was an age gap in those that did and didn't know about the ceremony. Only those that had been born during or before the natives' imprisonment at Fort Sumner knew anything about the Prostitution Way. Do you know what Fort Sumner is?
I don't.
I had no idea either. It is one of the internment camps that the Navajo and the Mescalero, I think is how you say that, Mescalero, Apache natives were forced into, and they were treated horribly. This took place in the early 1860s. Yeah. This was where there was kind of the the cultural changes that they were trying to force on the natives. Yeah. Apparently it was in a really bad, like, just geologic location. Like, there were no crops, water wasn't great. And there was no nearby trading outposts to like re-up on food and supplies, medicine. It was a really bad area. Navajo and the Apache natives were like malnourished. They would like die of starvation. Like, it was bad. There were long negotiations between the natives, and it was like army generals, like not just generals, but like, people in the army that were kind of behind this, as far as I know. I did a very small amount of research into this because, this podcast isn't really about that, but I did kind of want to touch on, this is a big event.
Right.
And just to kind of, hammer home the fact, like, this was a big turning point in Navajo culture and apparently in their knowledge base and, rituals and stuff seemingly were lost because of that.
That wouldn't surprise me at all, because that was like what we were trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. We were trying to, suppress and basically just turn them into Americans.
In that that other podcast I keep bringing up, with the Dead Meat podcast with Joey Clift, he talked a little bit about like these kind of camps where people were like just beaten almost to death just because they spoke a few words of their native language. So like it was really forced. That kind of stuff was forced out of them. And I can see like the idea that people born after this time, maybe they can't talk about it, but they'll have that knowledge in their mind from before still. Whereas like people born after that, they wouldn't even know about it because they weren't even allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, basically just like a cultural cleanse.
Yep.
Ugh, awful stuff.
History's fun.
Oh, yeah, especially American history. It's great, isn't it? Prostitution Way was also I don't know why I have also. This is my first time talking about what it was used to treat. But it was one of the things it was used for was to treat what Dr. Clyde reports as, in quotation marks, lewd women. So I'm assuming,
sexually active women.
Yeah, sexually active women. He also referenced like men with too many wives. He didn't go into specifically like what the Navajo would consider like, unacceptable sexual activity.
Right.
But I'm assuming any instance of that is what Prostitution Way was for.
Right. That's kind of a weird thing, is figuring out what he considers lewd women versus what, the Navajo might consider lewd women. Because America especially, and even more, he said, 1960s is when this book was written?
Yeah, like I think 67, yep.
Yeah, that's, I think, close to where we're talking to, like, peak satanic panic and stuff. So anything that's not, like, wholehearted Christian family values were considered lewd or perverse or something like that, so...
And I'm assuming even the name Prostitution Way is probably just, like, an attempt at a translation. Yeah. He was able to confirm through more thorough research that there at least used to exist a chant employed in the treatment of victims of frenzy witchcraft as well as lewdness. However, it seems that in that ceremony, ceremonial objects were very sparse. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a minimalistic, like they didn't need a ton of tools to do this ritual, lacking certain objects necessary in considering the ritual a chant possibly, because I guess a chant is a specific kind of ritual. So I keep calling it a chant because that's what the book calls it, but it may or may not technically qualify as one. And Dr. Clyde kind of speculates that this ceremony is nearly extinct by the time that he was doing this research in 67. I couldn't find any references to if it was still a thing nowadays.
Okay.
To be honest, I don't even know what the current state of the Navajo tribe is.
Yeah, that's fair.
I didn't, think that research was necessary to this podcast, and there was already so much information.
Yeah, we're an hour and a half in.
Jesus.
Before I make some cuts, because this episode, there is going to be cuts, and I apologize if some of them seem weird or abrupt. There's a lot of pauses. Like I said at the start, Kirrianna's getting over a flu, so there's some like coughs and
just me dying in the background.
Yeah, just some like casual death in the background. I'm gonna try to cut a bunch of that kind of stuff in the dead air out. So if there's any weird cuts, that's why. But we are currently an hour and 34 minutes into this podcast already. And we're in, like, I think page 5 or 6. So
no, we're on page 8. We're actually pretty close to the end. Yeah,
we're getting there.
But yeah, I don't know what the current state of this ceremony is, or what their current beliefs are. But to get into kind of as much nitty gritty of the actual ceremony as I can, most people report that it was a 5-long-day ritual.
Wow.
The use of datura in the ritual was used more for luck in gambling, trading, and seducing women.
Okay.
Some authors think this practice was historically used more against non-Navajo people, and that the use of that against foreigners was socially acceptable at the time.
Okay.
However, it became more taboo and considered witchcraft when Navajo started using it against fellow Navajo.
So the idea of like a Navajo person using it to like get better trading against someone who's not Navajo was considered okay.
Yes.
But using it to a fellow Navajo was considered taboo.
Correct.
Okay.
The lewdness in the book seems to be about sexual acts and behaviors viewed as taboo, like I was talking about before. Yeah, for example, if somebody had too many sexual partners or spouses, it was said that they would get a sickness from that.
Okay.
And it may be recommended to undertake the Prostitution Way ceremony as a way to prevent or cure that sickness.
Okay.
Frenzy witchcraft, that kind of ceremony is used more for gaining women and wealth. It could be used to make the wealthy foolish when trading or gambling, making them easier to steal from. And in frenzy witchcraft, like I said, it's used primarily against fellow Navajo.
Okay.
They also used datura to harm people. Like I said, it's got, very strong poison properties. It's a lot easier to use it as a poison than as a hallucinogen.
Yeah.
They would place it in food, cigarettes. They would give it through a kiss. Some people would chew it up and spit it into people's mouths.
Kiss of death.
Yeah, really. That's some, like, James Bond type shit.
So, yeah, for some reason that was what I was thinking of. Is like a James Bond villainous using that, yeah.
I know I've seen something like that before. I don't know if it was James Bond, but it's some kind of, like, spy thriller type shit.
Don't know a single thing about James Bond.
Yeah, I barely know anything besides GoldenEye. Or it was placed on an object the person was sure to touch.
Okay.
This is my own speculation, but it seems that they would use the hallucinogenic and health-harming effects of datura to make victims suggestible and not in their right mind. So, like, not only would it make them sick, but I feel like the hallucinogenic effects, it's very disassociative.
Right.
So I could see why that would be used to, like, swindle people or to seduce people. Just simply because it puts them in, like, a more suggestible state.
Right. And I also wonder if it's something to do, like you said before, the idea of, like, making someone sick and then, like, selling them the cure.
Right. Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that.
Some water.
The practitioners of frenzy witchcraft did not have the ability to transform into animals or take part in the witch's Sabbath.
And again, huh?
Yes.
So it's just sorcerers?
Yes.
Okay. Huh.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because
we didn't do this for this one. This sounds like it's like the rogue.
Yeah.
The rogue, or maybe like a rogue bard hybrid,
Yeah, high charisma for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up, all my bards out there?
Shout out. I'm not me personally, but shout out. You can cut that. That was dumb.
I think I might leave it.
No! Damn you. Why do I let you have all the control?
I got the power.
Phinn, our editor here. There were a few other types of skinwalkers mentioned, but they all seem to be slight variations on sorcerers.
Okay.
So I didn't include them because the variations are so minor that it was like we pretty much covered
Right.
sorcerers already.
Yeah.
So I already had so much notes that I was like, I don't feel like this is super pertinent information. None of it was like particularly interesting, and it was so similar that I just kind of left it out.
That makes sense. 10 pages.
Yeah, really. Well, the 10th page is just my sources.
Oh, okay. So we're at the last page. Ending thoughts.
Yeah.
We did it. We made it.
We did it, Reddit. So before I state my ending thoughts, do you have any thoughts?
I have nothing but thoughts right now, and I am reeling my head around all of this because I didn't know about any of this type of stuff. Like,
I had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like a whole world that we didn't know about.
Yeah, it really is. Because, like, yeah, my whole thoughts... So, another thing I noticed you didn't talk about, which is something that the Twin Paranormal guys especially have discussed multiple occasions, is the idea that skinwalkers are, again, the spiritual entity, but they are also, in a way, like a curse. Like, the idea that a native person would put a curse on a area or, like, a location or, you know, a plot of land or something to summon a skinwalker almost to like defend a specific plot of land, or like they would sometimes be used to like defend like the body of someone who was buried or something. But that doesn't even seem like it came up at all in your research.
No, and I actually heard similar things when I studied Skinwalker Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
Which I can't believe I didn't think about until just now, or else I would have gone into Skinwalker Ranch.
That I feel like is a whole other video.
Yeah, we could make that a whole other video. But yeah, that was an idea in Skinwalker Ranch, was that like the property was previously Native American, and that there was some kind of curse like protecting the property, and that Skinwalker activity was present because of that. But yeah, I didn't see any reference to that particular kind of cursing that we often hear in stories of, like, you know, this property was cursed by a Native American. Like, Native American, at least Navajo Skinwalker curses seem more geared towards them gaining something while they're alive. I didn't see a single reference to, like, you know, with his dying breath, he put a curse on the land. Like, I didn't see anything like that.
Wow, okay. And that's also, like, you know, we had, like, almost 10 full minutes of, like, disclaimers talking about, you know, why, like, this is about us learning new things and trying to teach the things that we learn that we are interested in because we're interested in them and we want to learn, and we're very curious people. And I feel like, you know, another just closing thought to talk, you know, to go back to that a little bit more is this idea that, you know, skinwalkers, yes, they are a Native American thing that is evil, but evil exists in all types of people. Like, there's no one group of people you're going to run into that is all 100% good or nice or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, evil is going to exist in all cultures, all groups of people and whatnot. So, like, you know, just please, like, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
As we're ending this topic where we talked about, you know, all this horrible thing like that these people do. They're just bad people from a group that just happens to be from a specific group.
Right. Yeah. We didn't make this episode in an attempt to paint Navajo people in a negative light at all. Quite the opposite, actually. I really wanted to just kind of cut through the fat of all of the, you know, kind of modern, seemingly inaccurate conceptions of skinwalkers to get to the truth about them.
Yeah, and this is like so much different than what I was thinking. Like, I thought we were going to be talking about like an actual entity, but we are talking about a type of person.
Yeah.
That's so crazy to me.
Yeah.
And that just, again, like I mentioned it before earlier in this podcast, but it just makes me think of all those stories of people, you know, like hunters going in the woods or whatever and seeing like some weird fucking deer or giant coyote or something and then like attacks them. That just makes me think of if, a percentage of them stories are true. I'm not saying every one of them is, obviously, but if a percentage of those stories are true, what the fuck is that?
That was one of the big thoughts that I had upon kind of coming to the end of this research was like you said, if a percentage of those stories are true, then what the fuck else is out there?
There's a story I remember listening to, and it actually gave me like chills. I don't remember the whole story, but it was like this group of people that went camping or something, and something was just fucking with them the whole time. And it was getting to the point where like they were like sleeping in shifts because it was just constantly fucking with them. And like there were moments where like people would turn and look at the group and see that there's another person in the group that they didn't recognize, and then they would turn again and that person is gone.
Oh fuck.
And
no.
like they were, like scratching at like the RV or whatever they were like camping in and stuff like that all night. They would sneak in from the bathroom window just to like hang out and like just watch them. And like, it was clearly someone that wasn't from their group, and like someone noticed this happening. Like he saw someone coming out of the bathroom, but he never saw someone going in. And then he like counted the number of people that were there, and he's like, that motherfucker doesn't belong here. Like that kind of shit. Who's like, what is that? Is that like...
Dude, that's hella creepy, though.
Because now you're saying, like, Skinwalkers can't. Because that, in that story, it was labeled as a Skinwalker story.
Yeah.
And, like, but you were just saying how they can't imitate people. They can transform into animals.
I don't know if they can't, but I did not see an example of that happening.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Nah, this seems like we're going to have to do another episode on Skinwalkers.
I'd like to do a bit more niche research on certain things, for sure.
Yeah, because this was... Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information I just wasn't expecting. And also, when, like, we're talking about all this idea of, like, dark magic and stuff like that, like... Yeah, that again just makes me wonder about like the idea of if these people, these skinwalkers, have this access to this dark magic, this clearly very powerful type of dark magic in life, if they do have a spirit and they are killed and that spirit decides, or maybe doesn't decide, but is trapped, in this plane of existence, I guess you could say, they can't move on or whatever.
Right.
That would seem to be possibly a reason for the twin paranormal moments where but then also a lot of the times those are considered female. And you just said earlier that skinwalkers were all male.
They're not all male, but
mostly male.
Yeah. Most of the reports of people's knowledge about them, a lot of them were male.
Wow. So I wonder where they got their information.
Yeah, because they talk about it like they got the information from somebody.
Yeah. I wonder if they just did like a less deep dive research and then kind of... Because, that's something that a lot of people are unfortunately... known to do, is like they'll do a little bit of research and then hear one thing and then just take it at face value.
Either that, or it's like more recent reports that are based more on like modern lore than historical Navajo beliefs.
That is perhaps also fair.
But yeah, I don't know.
Speaking of Navajo, like the beliefs and everything, one thing that I didn't touch on during that long disclaimer moment. So I talked about how like me and Kirrianna are very like we're very open to the idea of other beliefs, and like we try to be as respectful as possible. And there might be a smartass that might be thinking like, well, if you're so respectful and if you take these beliefs and you also believe them, and there's this idea that Skinwalker is now like possibly tracking you or whatever, why would you like make this episode and talk about them? That's just who we are. We're the type, like, we're that curious of people, it is going to kill us one day.
Probably, yeah.
You could put us in front of like a building and be like, hey, you can go and investigate that building if you want. But it has like some of the most violent paranormal activity that you'll ever see. Like something's going to get thrown at you. Someone's going to get scratched. Someone might even get bit. And we'll be like, I bet. Like, we're going in. We want to know.
We're grabbing the sleeping bags.
Yeah, we're just that type of person. We understand the risks. We respect them, but we just... It's just how we are. We just got to do it.
The instinct for discovery overrides self-preservation.
A lot of the times, yes.
Which, isn't really the best thing, and we wouldn't recommend that to you, but that's just how we are.
That's just how it is for us. So, yeah, oh man. But all this information is so intriguing, and that's kind of terrifying given what you have told me.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to not go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't remember the last Navajo person I ran into, if ever. So.
Your coworker, isn't he part Navajo?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. He just doesn't have any connection to a tribe or anything currently, but I do have a half Navajo coworker, and we did talk about Skinwalkers and just general Navajo beliefs for a little bit. We only really got to talk over 2 shifts, and even then, it was between responsibilities and customers and stuff. But
right, did he tell? Like, did any of this? Was he confirming any of it, or did he know of any of it, or
he knew a bit? He didn't know a ton. He said he's read a lot of books about it. Like I said, he's not connected to a tribe or anything, so he doesn't have like any knowledge
just has
passed
the DNA.
Down. Yeah. But he said in his limited knowledge of what he knows, and especially because I was only partway through my research at the time, what I had researched jived with what he knew.
Okay.
At the very least.
So what are these ending thoughts then? What do you got?
So I kind of wanted to talk about some of the like legends that the Navajo have about actual Skinwalker encounters and kind of the lessons that those stories taught.
Okay.
I'm not going to go super into detail. I don't even have notes about the actual story. I'm just going to kind of wing it off of my memory.
Perfect.
But, yeah. Essentially, the main story that I wanted to talk about was one about a Navajo parent couple that left their child to watch their younger child.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was 2 kids in one of their Hogans. And,
do you know the rough age?
I want to say the older kid was probably like 13, 14, and the younger kid was like single digits. Like
6, 7, maybe.
Yeah, somewhere around there, maybe like 10 max. But yeah, already a kid left to watch younger kid, and essentially they hear something outside of the Hogan. At first, it sounds like some kind of predator, but then it turns out to be a Skinwalker. And the older kid is so busy trying to like look outside and figure out what's going on that he doesn't realize that the younger kid is completely gone. So he's in a panic, waiting for his parents to come home. Dad comes in. He's like, "Dad, this happened. I'm so sorry." And Dad immediately goes into action mode. Like, "All right, we're going to go find your younger brother."
Right.
And I believe he sees, large animal tracks leading to a Hogan kind of on the outskirts of the tribe's like area that they had set up. And he goes in and he doesn't go in. He sees them out, like, the people that live in the Hogan outside, and he asks, "Hey, my son went missing. Could I look around here? Because it seems like there's a trail that leads here." And they're super nice, and they're like, "Yeah, absolutely. You can look around. Like, you could come inside and see. Like, we'll do everything we can to help you find your kid." He goes all around the house outside. He looks inside. He can't find anything. Turns out there's a basement that he eventually sees after finding nothing, and goes down, and upon arriving in the room, just sees rows of decapitated heads everywhere. And in the corner is just this, dark corner with a figure, and, the figure is like, oh, so you're looking for your son. And he points on the wall, and the son's head is already displayed on the wall. Yeah.
Did this story end there?
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
We don't even get like a satisfaction of being like, and then he picked up a dagger or something and went to town.
I wish, but no, unfortunately not.
Oh my god.
But I think that story, whether it's more a cautionary tale or, an actual account of something that happened, because I believe it was like orally passed down.
Right.
But I think it teaches good lessons of not leaving, especially young kids, unattended. Especially because, like I said, in Navajo culture, family is very important. Taking care of,
your elders and stuff, and they have that. At least to my knowledge, they have the idea of like, it takes a village to raise a child type deal. Like everyone pitches in, everyone does a part.
Yeah, absolutely. Skinwalkers represent, in my opinion, ever-present dangers in the real world. I mean, they're agents of chaos. They're the corruption of nature and harmony. Mm-hmm. They teach us to always be wary of people that want to disrupt peace and order. For those of us with empathy, it sounds like, Skinwalkers are very hurt people. And, they kind of do what they do because they do feel hurt. And, I don't know if you've heard the saying, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah, I have heard sayings like that. One of my favorites that I saw on Twitter was a retelling of that idea. Again, not to get too political on this podcast, this like spooky, creepy podcast thing, but the idea of like the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. But this was retold to say the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is to ensure that he grew up in a loving and supporting family and home and society, that he never became a bad guy in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And to, bring awareness to the fact that there are people like that out there in the world. And while, it's probably tragedy that led them to cause more tragedy, they need to be watched out for and,
right.
Avoided. I think they represent those in society that lack the usual values of love and teach us not to lose ourselves in that same resentment.
Also, greed seems to be a big thing with them too, where it's like, I want to have the most I can have, and like the type of people that's just never going to be happy with what they have, regardless of what it is.
True. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, 100%
I mean,
right.
Like, yes, we just talked, 2 minutes ago about the idea of like I just said, that quote, how to stop a bad guy with a gun is to ensure he never became a bad guy in the first place. Some people, I believe anyway, there are just some people that are just inherently bad.
Really?
Like,
you do think that people
I do believe
bad.
that there are just some people that have an inherent evil inside of them. Whatever happened, maybe it's a brain thing, maybe it's a spiritual thing, who knows? But I do believe that there are some people that are just bad, and like maybe even to the point of not being able to be fixed. Like, I'm not saying that I like that idea, but I just think that is something that I have, just from seeing or from knowing certain things about, like, like I've heard of, I'm not much of a true crime person, but I have like heard some true crime podcasts and like, have watched or listened to videos where people talk about serial killers or just bad people in general, where sometimes they have everything they could ever want, it seems, but they're just not happy with it and they want more. And like, there doesn't seem to be any real correlation to why they decided to do the evil things they decided to do, other than just not being happy with what they already had and feeling like they needed more and they deserved it more than other people. And to me, that just screams as someone who just seems like they're inherently bad.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot to get into toward the end of a podcast.
Very fun things to talk about in a podcast.
Well, I just have so many thoughts about that. Because
Yeah.
I've thought about that a lot. And, like, I think I agree with you. I feel like, in general, most people are kind of born as a blank slate. I mean, you know, when you're super young, you're just mostly selfish, right? Like, you're thinking of getting fed. You're thinking of, you know...
I want my Legos.
Yeah. But as you develop, I think it's, you know, up to environmental factors as to how you turn out and how you respond to those environmental factors. But I have seen cases where there's just like, it seems like a perfectly normal, loving family, but like, and they have multiple kids sometimes, but then just this one kid is like a fucking sociopath.
Right. And I've seen the exact opposites. I've seen like witnessed in real life people that I know with very dysfunctional families. We're talking about the type of families that if you walk in front of their house at any given point, you're hearing screaming and crying and yelling and throwing stuff. And then for some reason, there's just one kid from that family who just grows up to be a perfectly well-mannered person and like actually like seems to be like almost like the diamond in the rough, so to speak. Like they you know, have their own issues, of course, everyone does, but like outside of that, they are perfectly like good people, like, you know, and from a family where it seems like the natural order of ways was chaos, it seems like.
Yeah, interesting. That's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, so and finish up these ending thoughts. Let's not get into that too much more.
Yeah. But, yeah, it just seems to me like skinwalkers are just kind of the natural enemy to that bond that it seems like the Navajo people value so much within their own community and their own families. They represent the agents of chaos that every culture has the potential to produce. And as such, skinwalker stories themselves are kind of cautionary tales for that. Signs to look for, and bringing the attention of real dangers that, you know, any one of us can encounter in our everyday lives. They teach us to have each other's backs, to value our community and family, people that, you know, we're close with. Yeah, I love the saying of, you know, finding your tribe, even if that isn't your blood family.
Yeah.
I think the stories of and ideas about skinwalkers just really hone in on that very human idea of, you know, we're very social creatures and leaning on each other is, you know, going to produce better effects often,
right,
than, you know, trying to go it alone, I guess.
Yeah.
As much of a loner as we tend to be.
right.
And yeah, to keep ourselves safe from physical and spiritual dangers, I think really is just a big facet of skinwalker stories.
So if for some reason you're still watching this 2-hour long podcast about skinwalkers and you're the type of person who can hear all this stuff and think that it is just 100% bullshit, or like, you know, it's all fake, even if that is the case, you could easily see, we talk about, like, here in America anyway, you know, there's the idea of like the boogeyman, or you know, we have like demons or whatever kind of cautionary tale that you can think of for us. It, you know, like, even if you don't believe that skinwalkers are a true, like, real thing, they are clearly something that could just, at the very least, be seen as this kind of like cautionary tale, like this, you know, essentially a boogeyman situation.
Yeah, they represent a very common and important archetype in our culture, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of...
Yeah, a lot.
How you feeling after talking for 2 hours straight?
I feel like Atlas and I finally put the globe down for a little bit.
So, what is today? Today is Wednesday, I think.
My dudes?
Yeah, the day of recording this is Wednesday. No. Well, technically it's Thursday. but that's just because it's 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we actually started this on Wednesday.
The entire day podcast.
Yeah, the hope of this podcast is to come out with an episode every 2 weeks. I'm going to try to make it on Thursday. In this situation, we didn't get to finish the recording until Thursday. That's hopefully not going to be a common theme. Just so happened that Kirrianna got sick.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's not your fault. So I'm going to be taking next episode. Thankfully, you're going to give your voice a bit of a break.
Yeah. It needs it.
I have 2 potential topics. I have already started research for one, and I want to be able to get this into a podcast that is at least close to an hour long.
Although a short episode after this 2+ hours.
I was just gonna say, yeah. Although if I do a shorter episode, I don't think I'd be too unhappy about it, because what I want to talk about is doppelgangers.
Yeah.
That is a topic that has always fascinated me, the idea of doppelgangers. But
Same.
upon the research that I have been able to start, actual knowledge of doppelgangers seem to be pretty limited. Or you type in doppelgangers and you just get websites where it's find your doppelganger, or it's I think one of the websites is Twin Strangers, and it uses reverse
image searching.
Yeah, reverse image searching to find your twin stranger or your doppelganger.
And you showed me some of those pictures. Some of the similarities are crazy uncanny.
Yeah. But the actual research to do on doppelgangers just doesn't seem to be a whole lot when we're talking especially about the paranormal supernatural creature that we know of as a doppelganger. So what that episode might be is kind of just a little bit of talking about their origins, a little bit of where they come from. I did find one of the more popular old depictions of doppelgangers from the 1800s or something, which is a painting. And then maybe talk about some doppelgangers in media. There's one movie in particular I really want to bring up because it has probably one of my favorite depictions of a doppelganger ever.
Oh, okay.
It's terrifying. And then there's a couple of cases of doppelgangers. I might look for other stories of them, but there's at least 2 cases of people, powerful people, famous people meeting their doppelgangers or coming into contact with their doppelgangers.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned something like that to me, and I'm very excited to hear who and what happened.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully it'll be out on Thursday, not next Thursday, but the Thursday after in 2 weeks. And I hope you enjoyed this extra long podcast episode. We have been recording for 2 hours and 8 minutes.
Your time stamp mileage may vary depending on editing.
Yeah, I'm going to try to edit as much of this down. But I hope you enjoyed this very fascinating episode talking about Skinwalkers. And
I certainly did.
I definitely did. This is a lot of information that I was not expecting to hear.
Tell me about it. I've been trying to keep this all in my head for 2 weeks straight.
Well, with that being said, my name is Phinn, a.k.a. The Fish.
My name is Kirrianna, also known as The Fox.
We have socials. Kirrianna's sources are going to be in the description as well. And is there anything else to bring up before we end this? Our brain is fried. Follow us on social media. Twitter, YouTube. I don't know if Kirrianna has a YouTube yet.
I do, but please don't look at those videos.
Fair enough.
If you're gonna link my YouTube, I'm gonna be unlisting a lot of videos.
Okay, that's fair enough. She'll get a YouTube up later, I'm sure.
But if there is anything I would have to leave people with, it would be love each other.
Yes, love each other. It's a good message.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Oh, the other idea that I have, if doppelgangers don't work out, is a incident called the Bell Witch haunting, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
One of the most interesting hauntings that I've ever heard of, because it's the only like actual paranormal death seemingly that I've ever heard of someone seemingly dying from like actual paranormal causes.
Yeah, that sounds crazy. I'd
So,
love to dig into that.
If doppelgangers don't happen, you have that to look forward to. So
Hell
look
yeah.
forward to one of those two.
Even if doppelgangers do happen, I would love to dive into that.
Yeah, maybe next episode after that. See you guys later.